sit down again.
Words are delicious. Words like kismet, serendipity, or lagniappe. I especially like lagniappe, which I learned while living in New Orleans. It means a happy surprise and describes my opportunity to introduce our next presenter to you, Heather Markham. She'll be speaking about the power of words in creating your life story. My own story includes the joy of raising 2 adoptive black sisters. I saw how a single racist word can crush a child's spirit. Americans who lived through integration saw how a simple phrase like, "I have a dream," can inspire a nation. Heather was diagnosed at age 34 with a progressive muscular dystrophy. She used the power of words in her own life to become a para-surfer, an adaptive technology professional, an engineer, and an award-winning photographer. Here she is. I introduce Heather Markham to tell you more in her own words. Please hold your questions until the end of her presentation. You can use the ampersand to show that your hand is raised to speak at that time.
Thank you for that introduction, Basona. Indeed, words matter. I'm just doing a check that we've got a good mic. Are we clear? Awesome. Okay. I want to talk to you about words as labels and the power of them, and to encourage you to choose the words you want spoken over you and about you. In a few places, I'm going to read excerpts from my memoir, Rough Waters, From Surviving to Thriving with a Progressive Muscular Dystrophy. And at the end, I'll tell you how to find the book and to connect with me to keep the conversation going. Once upon a time. On the left is a picture of me at the age of 3 with my older brother. Mom always called this my model pose, with my legs crossed at the ankle. My dad was in the military, so we moved pretty frequently, but otherwise things were fairly ordinary. I was healthy-ish, apart from being Mom's clumsy girl. I fell down, apparently a lot. That resulted in broken bones, major scrapes and cuts that needed stitches and the like. Mom noticed that I didn't heal as quickly as she expected, but otherwise we didn't think about it too much. By college, I was a little less clumsy and managed to rock this short black dress with my heels in my senior formal. I include this picture because I loved my legs. I had great legs. Oh, and that guy, he wasn't too bad looking either. But honestly, I had a hard time dating someone who was prettier than me. And living in different states didn't help. In the spring of 1990, I injured my back, which set off a chain of events in my body. I'm told that it apparently triggered something in my genetics to stop making the Band-Aid that heals torn muscles. By 1997, the muscle wasting in my legs was pretty evident, as is shown in this picture from Key West, My dad is in the yellow shirt and my nephew is in the black shirt. As my disease progressed, I began running into challenges. I need to back up and tell you that this slide in 1997, it would be another 5 years before I was diagnosed. Okay, on to progression challenges. There are a lot of logistical challenges that come with a progressive disease. The first was terrain. This sign was actually at the San Diego Zoo, and it reads, "Caution, steep grade. For your safety, this path not recommended for persons in manual wheelchairs. All others use extreme caution to avoid serious injury. See map for alternate paths. Wheelchair users may request shuttle assistance." Okay, well, they must mean manual wheelchair users, because I currently use a power chair, and that isn't going to fit on any tram that they've got. But during this time, I was using a cane and ankle foot orthoses leg braces for short distances and a transport chair for longer distances. A transport chair is kind of like a kitchen chair that somebody decided to put wheels on and armrests and a sling seat. Like, you can't push the darn thing. All you can do is get pushed around on it. The friend I was with at the zoo that day and I decided to take an alternate path. Terrain is still a challenge for me. I currently use a very high-tech power wheelchair that has lots of seating functions, including power standing, which actually makes its empty weight just over 480 pounds. Gravel and boggy grass are my enemies. Another logistical challenge that comes with progression is making standard fittings compatible and usable when traveling. I recommend carrying some form of duct tape. I have difficulty with large uphill transfers due to shoulder weakness in my shoulders, so I always resort to that, taping a toilet seat riser onto a perfectly good standard height toilet. This particular picture happens to be in North Carolina at Carolina Beach when I was there for this surfing event. I was blonde in those days. Another logistical challenge is that when I lost my ability to walk, I started to rely needing on more technology and people. Technology like this beach wheelchair, okay, which has its little, they come in a variety of flavors. This one just happens to have 3 wheels. And at the beach, I need someone to push that chair. And that large mountain of a man in the back is the biggest, softest, hardest dude you'd ever want to meet. He was actually the person who was going to pick me up off of this wheelchair and set me down onto my surfboard. And you need people to pick you up. When there's not a mountain of a man around, it can take between 2 and 4 people to safely pick up someone and move them. And then you have to have all those same people to do things in reverse. A logistical challenge that comes with progression is doing basic things. I mean, like, give a friend a high five. My hands have deteriorated to the point where they actually don't open up flat anymore. And I don't have the shoulder strength to hold my arm up that high. In this photo, the man in the green shirt is actually a professional photographer who was doing video. And he said, "Hey, y'all know each other, give each other high fives." And the gal whose face is obscured by her floaty, I love her, Heidi, and her arm floaties, that was very easy for her. She has a fairly low spinal cord injury. But for me, that doesn't happen. So my friend who had pushed that beach wheelchair is actually ducked down, and that's his hand is circled with that red circle. And he was the one who was holding my arm up high enough to be able to do just a simple high five. I'm grateful for these small things and my friends that help me remove the otherwise frustrating things that go on. You know, I just want to be able to operate in the ordinary world. So I've done a bunch of stuff. I mean, like, you know, a bunch of stuff. I put this slide of titles up not to say, wow, isn't she amazing? Look at all the stuff I've done, but just to show you that I'm a restless spirit. I do things because they're interesting. I belly danced for a few years. I was a professional baker because I needed a job and was willing to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was a janitor in high school, Miss Wheelchair Kentucky, because I wanted to publicly speak and wear a shiny tiara. I wrote a book, which I'll tell you more about. I've done all these things, but they also tell you that it's possible to reinvent yourself. As my progression increased, I began to use more technology. These photos were taken in 2008 and screen grabbed out of a video that I did when I was applying for a service dog. The picture on the left shows me putting a custom ankle-foot orthoses into a shoe. Okay, it's a bowling shoe because I was going bowling. And to throw the ball, the 6-pound bowling ball that was custom drilled for my hand, I used a cane and I thumped down the aisle and I stood still and heaved that ball for all I had. And guess what? Sometimes I got a strike. Not too many gutter balls. I liked doing it because it was fun and I still could. At that time, I was also using a handbrake in my car, which I had installed iSky, yep, an AFO is an ankle-foot orthoses. These were actually custom done at UCLA Medical, where I was being seen, and have a hinge out of some rubber tubing that let me have like 5 degrees of ankle flexion. So the handbrake that was installed in my car was because I actually slid through a couple of stop signs going very slowly when I couldn't get my foot moved from the gas to the brake pedal fast enough. I was also using a cane full time. The picture on the right shows me sitting down on the scooter that work provided for me, because the distance between where I plugged in my scooter at night and my own cubicle was nearly a quarter of a mile away. And yes, the compound was enormous. I've had a lot of tech that I've used. Some of it low tech, some of it high tech. But it's funny how we as humans like to shortcut things. People often refer to me as that lady with fill in the blank. Oh yes, that lady with the cane. That lady with the walker, even though it was a rollator because it had wheels. That lady with the scooter, that lady with the power wheelchair. But tech isn't, oh, and that lady with the dog. I've been that lady with the dog for a really long time, even though she's gone. Okay. The fact is that tech didn't, and tech doesn't make it my identity just because it's with me all the time. And it doesn't make me less than. I want to say that again for people in the back. Using tech doesn't make me less than. Okay, now I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know. But we're going to say it again. Okay? Tech doesn't make me less than. In fact, using tech creates freedom for me. With my cane, it was freedom from stumbling. And when I had bilateral AFOs, those ankle foot orthoses, it was freedom from foot drop so I didn't trip over my own toes repeatedly. Like I did one day carrying a can of paint that I then happened to land on. Somebody say, ouch. That was pretty ugly. Yeah, I decided not to do that again. My rollator gave me a place to sit. The scooter gave me freedom to go long distances because I had started avoiding places. And my power wheelchairs have given me freedom to navigate. First Pittsburgh, and then to roam further, and now my wheelchair stands me up. And my service dog partner, well, she was freedom from isolation. Because dogs, well, they need to go out. So there was no sitting home for days on end. I had to take my girl out. Had to be seen. Because if you want to attract attention, get a service dog. I'm just gonna tell you that. Everyone is gonna want to pet that dog. Here in Second Life, tech gives us freedom. I mean, I have beautiful wings on today that I'd never be able to wear otherwise. But out in the physical world, sometimes tech can make us feel isolated. Like my friend Spike. This is Spike. Spike Kane. Who actually talked me into competitive surfing. He has quadriplegia and competes surfing prone, laying down on this board. And this photo was taken by Jason Rose in 2016. This wave looks like it's gonna smash poor Spike to smithereens. And sometimes this is how we can feel. Or it can make you feel as alone as I look in this photo taken in 2012, where I was sitting on a bench in an empty pavilion at the beach where there was absolutely no one and no tech visible. I'm just correcting Electra's writing for me. His name is actually Spike. That's okay. I just wanted everyone to know. Because he's actually from England. Which isn't relevant here, but he's my friend, so all good. Yes, Sassy, exactly like that. I will tell him that. He will think that's really funny. But I have to tell you and remind you, as is evidenced by everyone here today, that life is much more like this party wave. That's what they call it when everyone's on the same wave. A party wave. This photo is also taken by Jason Rose. There are some people going in the same direction as you. Some slower, some faster, others peeling off and doing their own thing. There are safety people like the guys on the jet ski who are standing by ready for immediate help. And some safety people on the outside, you can see them in the back sitting up on their surfboards just beyond the jet skis. And then there are people out in the background of this photo. Those are not your people. They're spectators. Your people are the ones who align with the words that you've chosen about yourself. They are your team. I'd like to read to you now an excerpt from my book about a couple of teams. The first was one I was a part of, and the second is about a team that I witnessed. Both bring home the importance of finding your team. Early the next morning, we went down to Far Rockaway Beach on Long Island to surf with Life Rolls On. One of the volunteers I had been teamed up with in New Jersey for the last 2 years had made the trip up to New York, and I was on his team again. He was in his late 20s with ropey yoga muscles and red hair. His huge smile and blue eyes spoke of both the quiet of surfing at dawn and mischief making. After getting me moved from my manual wheelchair to the beach wheelchair and placed onto the surfboard, the team of volunteers princess carried me and the surfboard into the warm and crystalline green water. The waves were large that day for Long Island, the largest breaking at 5 feet high. There was no way to get the board over the crests, so we went through most of them. I got pummeled. Treading water, the members of the deep water team took turns as the adaptive tandem rider on the back of my board. I begged to be turned loose and for them to jump off so I could fly on my own. I wanted that feeling back that I'd had in New Jersey the year before, the thrill and the challenge of getting a perfect ride. I had a couple of good rides that took me all the way into the beach, but twice the drastic weight shift sent the nose of the board pitching straight into the water and me tumbling off the front at high speed. After the last wipe out, my red-headed New Jersey guy found me in the waist-deep mid-water section where he had been waiting. My board was elsewhere, having jettisoned itself out from underneath me when I hit the water face first. I had just finished tumbling. He'd been watching, seen my trajectory, and put himself in my path. He squatted down to catch me face to face. I knew his presence meant safety. I wrapped my arms around his neck and my legs around his waist, and I rested my head on his shoulders. As I fought to catch my breath, I clung to him like an octopus. I'm done. Take me in. With his arms wrapped around my back, and as he held me tightly, he hesitated. You're sure? Your 30-minute set's not done. Yeah, I'm thrashed. He knew I lived in Pittsburgh, had driven 400 miles just to be there, and liked being in big waves. I wouldn't tag out if I weren't serious. He walked to the shore with me still suctioned in place, my chest to his, until we got to the beach wheelchair, which had been brought down for me. There were some big ones today, he said. It wasn't a question. He was a surfer, and although he surfed standing up, he knew that a 5-foot wave could feel like it's 20 feet high when you're lying down. Toweled off and back on my manual wheelchair, I was taking photos of various other surfers when I saw my friend Jay being carried out for his set. He lived with tetraplegia as a result of a trampoline accident in high school, and although in his late 30s, he seemed ageless to me, with his very, very thin frame and his hair sheared nearly to stubble. While part of the team carried him, others carried his board, which was big and floaty. Jay's board had been custom made for him by Channel Islands Surfboards in California. At the nose was a large sticker that read Surf Gimp in flourishy script with artwork of a person sitting on a manual wheelchair riding a surfboard, as that was Jay's title for himself. He surfed every weekend around his home beach in Delaware. He had a crew of about 50 people that he called Team Surf Gimp. I focused my camera on him. He caught the first few waves without a problem, but on the last one, he had a massive wipeout. The board went shooting off at a 45-degree angle and he got thrown off. It looked bad from where I sat. as the 15 in-water volunteers for his LRO team all raced towards him, where he was floating face down in the water. Jay's team and family and friends all knew that he didn't have any muscle control below the level of his spinal cord injury at the C4-C5 junction in his neck, which meant he couldn't roll himself over. My hips and shoulders were weak, but I could still flop around and rotate enough to get myself righted. The thought of not being able to roll over frightened me. I counted the seconds, afraid he had been knocked unconscious. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His team got to him, righted him so that he had air, and supported him on the water while we all waited. As I remembered to take in my own breath, I took a photograph that still resonates deeply for me. Through my long zoom lens, I could see his smile. Even though his team looked anxious, he was talking to them and reassuring them. I have no doubt that if his 30-minute set hadn't been up, he would have found a way to convince them to put him back on that board to catch another wave. But for today, he was done. They carried him out of the water, put him back on his own manual wheelchair, and then brought him back to where the rest of the surfers were waiting. Once the chaos of the transition had settled down and his wife had dried him off, I went over and asked him about the wipeout. We had surfed together before, so I knew he would take my question for what it was. Simple curiosity. What do you do when you end up like that? Face down. Isn't it scary? I hold my breath and wait. I don't worry. I know they're coming for me. He trusted his team. He had faith in them. It seems very simple, but this struck me as profound. How often was I in a situation where I should just wait and have faith instead of floundering around and panicking? Reflecting on this attitude, I later came up with a personal motto from the combination of Hebrews 11:1 and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have faith, don't panic, and always carry a towel. This seems like a natural place to talk about competitive parasurfing. It used to be called adaptive surfing. The image on this is a screen capture from the 2018 Hawaii Adaptive Surfing Championship with a water safety guy on the jet ski and me laying on the surfboard in my white competition rash guard and silver helmet. That large red marker in the back is inflatable and it marks the beginning of the competition lane. I'll drop a link in the chat at the end so you can go back and watch the clip. I had intended to show a video here, but used a series of still photos instead because I'm struggling with connection issues and didn't want to make this more challenging. These pictures are from the GoPro camera, which was actually mounted on the front of my surfboard. I was just struggling for balance, trying to stay on. And we had put a life vest on me because we weren't completely comfortable with my ability to get out of trouble if something terrible happened. I was leaning off to my right, which is why the horizon does not look straight. My arms were way bent up underneath me and my fists right up against my sternum. At my feet, not visible from this angle, is Tony. His title is Pusher, which would be weird in a different context. But he was responsible for helping me to choose waves and then kicking like crazy to launch me into them. This image is when the swell had actually reached me. That white feather at the top is right when the wave is starting to break. And right up close, it's nearly see-through. This photo shows that the wave is now picked up the board, and there's a little bit of a smash that happens as you drop. It's really kind of cool. And you can see the white water on the board's rails as it's starting to move. I actually finally looked where I was going, which is kind of a good thing, you know, look where you're going. And you can tell the speed from the side rails. As the wave was actually, I think we were kind of getting close to it dying out based on where the white water is. I moved to Arizona right before COVID shut down the whole world. But when the restrictions eased up, I began for looking something social and outside and active to do. You know, kind of on the regular without driving all the way over to Southern California just to surf. And I live in a retirement community that has a golf course. So that kind of seemed fairly natural. At a physical therapy appointment, I saw flyers for a golf clinic with ADRAC23 which is the local independent Center for Independent Living. And they have a huge outdoor rec program. And I relearned how to swing a golf club. And I say relearned because I had golfed in high school, but I didn't have a wheelchair back then. In the relearning, I found that I can use the standing feature of my wheelchair and a few extra things. The next task was to find a place near my home to practice hitting. But the driving range wasn't accessible. So I advocated for change. I found the people who could make the decision and had the power to execute it, and just was smiling and annoying. Eventually, they got a curb cut put in and created a ramp and painted the stripes and did all the stuff so that I could get on the driving range. They actually had to put the blue stripes there to keep people from parking their golf carts there. And I love the sunset picture because it's everything. Now, dads being dads, my dad's one of those dads. He actually rolled his eyes when I told him I was golfing again because he couldn't picture what that would look like. How I could possibly golf with a wheelchair. So I told him I was doing it standing, and one day I invited him to watch me hit at the driving range. His response was that it was interesting and that my shots were consistent. Well, that's high praise from my dad, so I'll take it. I've been doing it intermittently for a couple of years now, and I've been making improvements. I'm getting stronger. They're going more than 20 yards now before they bounce. My golf instructor's pleased. This is actually me standing up to putt using what's called a stand-up and play paragolfer wheelchair. And it was during an Ability 360 clinic at the Encanto 9 short course, public golf course. I made that 20-foot putt on the first try because I was lined up properly. I mean, really, just because I was lined up properly. I now have 2 elastic bands wrapped around my hands that are keeping my hands in contact with the club because my grip is very weak. I want to talk a little bit about my photography too. Oh, orange question. Can you hold till the end? Oh, great question, which was asked, do I ever get asked if someone can play through? I've only played at the clinics, and it's just us at the clinics. But we have had some people who've wanted to play through it, and we just let them, because I'm slow. Yeah, it just comes with the territory. So photography, I've been taking pictures since I was 10. Okay, a long time. And I just wanted to see how good I was, so I started entering contests, juried gallery shows. And the jury decides if your photo's good enough to go up. This map shows the locations where I've had photos go up. Los Angeles, Wichita, Kansas, Barcelona, Spain, Rome, Athens, Budapest, and Brighton in the United Kingdom. So, pretty awesome. This image is from the wheelchair rugby finals, quad wheelchair rugby finals. It won 3rd place in a show in the motion category. Now, what's awesome to me about this photo and about that 3rd place prize is that the jurors don't know that I use a power wheelchair. So when it was selected and hung in that gallery in Barcelona and I got to go be next to it, I got to doubly represent for the wheelchair community. I'm thrilled that the gallery patrons got to see elite wheelchair athletes on display. And I personally think it should go up in rehab facilities all over the place. I get a lot of questions about, well, how can you take photographs if you can't pick up your arms? So I have a couple of cameras. I have this little tiny one. And when I say tiny, I mean it's the size of a pack of playing cards. Tiny, tiny. But it has a fairly large sensor, so it captures a lot of data. The only downside is that it doesn't have a screen that tilts. So I kind of shoot it without actually being able to see everything that I'm getting a picture of. What I primarily shoot looks like a digital SLR, but it's about 2/3 of the size of it and 2/3 of the weight. It's called the Micro Four Thirds, and this one's by Olympus. So the image that's in the top left is actually of the screen taking a picture of what's in the background. And it tilts and it rotates, and I love it. And they'll take great big long zoom lenses, as you can see over my shoulder, and then what it looks like from the front. I use my power wheelchair to tilt so that I can actually get good angles. Or I've used my Jayco robotic arm to hold that camera up at eye level and use my phone to trigger the shutter. Same titles, same list. But this photo is called Jailbird, and it amuses the heck out of me. It was actually a finalist in the 2022 Bird Photographer of the Year contest. This poor little juvenile great blue heron thinks he's hiding from me. But I wanted to put the titles back up because I want to talk about the difference and how they relate to identity. A lot of times what happens is that people associate their job titles with themselves. I'm a photographer. Well, what happens if I stop being able to take photographs? Am I still a photographer? Yes or no? I don't know. What if I can't golf anymore? Well, that means I'm not a golfer. That's not my identity anymore. But Miss Wheelchair Kentucky, as an accessibility inspector and as a rehabilitation technologist and assistive technology professional, my identity is really advocate, right? In each of those cases, my identity is advocate. As an author, I'm a writer, and I'll always be a writer whether I author another book or not. Let's consider the identity labels and how they relate to attributes, though. As a photographer, I'm patient. As a surfer, I'm a problem solver. Why am I going to choose problem solver? Well, because Kelly Slater, 11-time world champion, calls himself a problem solver. And the reality is, the ocean doesn't care if you live or die. right? So you better solve that problem so that the wave doesn't take you out. Where do you need to be to catch a perfect wave? Problem solving. As a golfer, I jokingly put up long suffering here as the attribute. In my advocacy role, I'm personable and curious and compassionate and tenacious. And as a writer, well, you've probably figured out I'm a little wordy. But I want you to consider the fact that those aren't really attributes or personality traits or characteristics so much as they're skills. And skills can be learned. I want to read you another excerpt from my book where I had to find 5 words to describe me and go into some detail about them. Nicole Trick-Steinbach, who's an international bravery coach, read my book, and she took this as a challenge unto herself. And when I'm done with the expert, we're going to ponder the same thing. There was another round of interviews in the afternoon, and then we were given some time to collect our thoughts before the public part of the pageant began at 3 p.m. I sat in a corner of the lobby and scribbled notes on index cards about the 5 words that we used to describe ourselves. We'd had to submit them with our application, and they were printed inside the program beside our picture. I would now have to elaborate on them and answer 2 random questions from the judges in something like 30 minutes. Whatever I had managed to write down would have to be enough. I went up to my room, brushed my hair again, and did a makeup and wardrobe check to make sure I looked finals ready. We were told not to wear a gown, so I'd chosen a smart pink wool suit jacket with a cream silk blouse and an off-white fine wool skirt from Talbot's. My pageant shoes were silver glittered slingback peep toe pumps with a kitten heel. I had been all about the sparkle when I belly danced, and sitting down hadn't changed that. I was determined that winner or not, I would shine. With 50 people in attendance in a small hotel ballroom, we talked about our 5 words. I was handed the microphone, planted my right elbow on the wheelchair's armrest to steady it, bending slightly sideways so that I spoke directly into it. I read each of my words aloud: advocate, creative, compassionate, adventurous, and loved. And I elaborated on each one of them the best I could, using what I'd written on the note cards while sitting in the lobby. Except that I didn't elaborate on loved. It was the card I hadn't had time to get to. So now the words escaped me. My ad-libbing brain just froze. So I just let it sit. I saw people in the room shift in their chairs, and I heard the women behind me on their wheelchairs moving also, so I was sure that the last word rankled some people. Maybe it was seen as too bold, too brash, or narcissistic. Everyone is loved. How dare I include it? But I didn't mean beloved, as in everyone thinks I'm amazing. I meant that I knew I was loved by God, and I was also loved and supported by my family and friends. It is their fierce love that holds me up and lets me boldly put myself out there and reach for my most impossible dreams. These were my words in 2012, 13. I lose track. I think my list now would include or be believing, curious, tenacious, grateful, and brave. Making it to this point in my progression with an unknown prognosis means that these are all part of how I move through the world on a daily basis. People say to me, "You have such a good attitude." It's one of the few things that I have control over. My attitude and my reactions. I believe that every day we decide who we are, the words that describe us, how we move through the world. We decide every single moment of every single day. You get to choose the title of your own story. I do this 5-word challenge, as Nicole called it, weekly with one of my mentors. She told me the 5 words she uses when she talks about me to others, and challenged me to step up and into her vision of me, which is bigger and bolder and more powerful and more unapologetic. And I'm grateful to that. What are your 5 words? This is how you find me. And I think that this card has been put so you can reach it. And this is the YouTube clip. Do not do that. Cancel that. Copy, paste. Okay. Hey, Gentle, I landed that on time. Okay, any questions? Hey, Faith, I have considered scuba diving. It just hasn't gone to my list yet. Actually, jumping out of an airplane is on my to be done in the next 3 years list. Oh, thanks, Mook. I am still writing Attica. In fact, my photography website has a little bit of a blog that I'm working on. That's wrong. It should be justforthelove.com. My Making Waves for Good does a lot of writing. There's a lot of writing over there. And I am newly engaged to my high school sweetheart who found me again after we had had separate lives for a very long time. And we're going to write our story. Thanks, Attica and Faith. Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you, Gemma. Thanks, Lady Tigress. My connection is so slow. A lot of you are just shadows, so I don't get to see you all. Okay, if we're done, I'm going to stand up and walk away.